Here.
Kennedy.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
McGlashan.
Here.
Natoli. Peters. Soto. Starsky. Terry. Warren. We have a quorum.
Great. Mr. Lee, would you like to do the Pledge of Allegiance?
Absolutely. Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Mr. Air Pollution Control Officer, would you like to give your report?
Yes, I have just a few things. One is that for our next board meeting, which is March 26th, that's the same morning as the breakfast for RT. So we will have to move the time for this meeting till 10 o'clock. Since this meeting normally starts at 9, that event gets over at 9:30. It's in downtown, so we'll move this meeting till 10 o'clock with and the chair and I have talked about that, so he thought that was a good idea. Cap to cap, I want to remind everyone we have an air team. We have board members, Cruz and let's see, Sue Frost are already signed up on the air team, and I think that board member Hanson will be splitting his time between the RT and the air team. So we'll have a good representation for that. Encourage everybody to sign up, and if you want to be on the air team, sign up for that. We are always looking for more members. We have a very robust agenda this year, I think, with papers that we've already put together. There's been a lot of interest in that, so we're working on our agenda with the chamber right now. And that's everything I have.
Great. Thank you, Larry. All right, consent calendar. Anybody?
Do you want me to read the item?
Yes, please.
Item number 4, adopt a resolution authorizing the Executive Director, Air Pollution Control Officer to execute a heavy-duty, low-emission vehicle incentive program agreement exceeding $500,000 with Barrios Farms, Inc.
Great, thank you. Anybody have questions on this or want to make a motion?
Move consent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? All right.
Okay.
Next item.
Next item is separate matters. Item number 5, adopt a motion reestablishing and selecting members for the District Board Subcommittee for Budget and Personnel Matters.
Yes, this committee meets a couple of times a year on the budget, and we will have a meeting in March to pre-brief that committee about the budget. We get their input, and then we bring at the next meeting, at the April meeting, we'll bring the first reading of the budget back to the board. But it's an important committee. If we have any personnel issues that we need to bring to the board, then this committee also hears those. So we have a recommendation here in the packet. If the board wants to do this and these members are fine, then we recommend that the board adopt this.
Anybody have questions about the proposed recommendations or would like to move it? Anybody else want a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right.
Next item is item number 6, adopt a motion establishing a District Board Subcommittee for selection of hearing board members.
The district has a hearing board that this board appoints. The hearing board is established in state law as a requirement of every air district. The hearing board has a number of functions. They can do abatement orders. If the district has a permit that we deny, it can be appealed to the hearing board. And the hearing board also hears variances. So our hearing board meets maybe once a month throughout the year. In some districts, they meet a full day a week in South Coast. So it just depends on the business that you have. But we always have an issue when we have hearing board members of getting of a process to get the new members that are being recommended vetted by the board and then to a vote. So what this does is, this is just a very small committee that's accessed a few times a year, and they just review, or their staff reviews, the proposed members of the hearing board as they come up. So we recommend that the board move this item. It would add for this year, it would be the chair, it would be Phil Cerna. Let's see. You appoint those, don't you? I guess
I do.
Yeah, the board chair appoints those.
Yeah, well, and I was going to say, I know I have to serve on it as chair, but are there 2 members of the board that volunteer? I believe it's a fairly minimal commitment. Who would like to serve on the hearing board?
I'll be happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr. Starsky. One more willing victim?
I'm
Okay, Ms.
willing
Frost.
to continue.
Oh yeah, okay, great, Roberta. We'd love to have you. So, so I'll appoint Ms. McGlashan and Mr. Starsky.
Okay, great. All right.
Do we need a motion, since it's a chair appointment?
I think we were
Do we have a
just,
motion?
For this item, you don't,
Yeah.
because it's chair.
Okay. Great. Next item.
Next item is a public hearing, item number 8. Oh, I'm sorry. My mistake. Separate matters. Item number 7, adopt a motion to approve the proposed changes to the board directives for state and federal legislation and regulation.
this is a very important document for the district staff. What it does is it establishes, for areas that we typically work in, the board's direction on how we should move forward. It allows myself and the staff for our regular business to move forward on legislation, on bills, on our interaction with the state and federal governments, agencies that we work with. And it gives us the board's direction on how we should proceed in those areas. We amend this over the years here and there. You'll see some odd items in here like the leaf blower thing, but that was there because a board member wanted it put on there, so it's there for that reason. But we've got a couple of changes this year. One is changing the bike ped item to sustainable projects and programs. The reason we did that is there's so much emphasis right now on sustainable projects and programs in the cap and trade program at the Air Resources Board that we just felt like the language needed to be modernized and brought up to date. And the second item is, of course, on wood smoke and wildfires. And obviously the board has been interested in that item for many years. There are initiatives at the state and federal level that may turn into significant incentive funding for the Air District. And I wanted to have this clearly on my footprint in this document as something that I should be working on. We have a very good chance to get cap and trade funding, get wood stoves added as an item in cap and trade funding. And in next year's budget, we've been, CAPCOA, the air districts have been meeting with we met with the governor's office recently, and we've been working with the Air Resources Board on that. There is the possibility of getting federal money, like the DERA diesel program, getting a federal program, but that's a longer shot. And although the Northeast states and Westar, which is the Western states, is an organization of Western states, want to move that forward, that's going to be something that will take a number of years. So those are the two changes. And if the board members have any questions about those, I'll be happy to speak to those. And I also have a short presentation on adaptation and global warming. I wanted to talk about that a bit. That's not an item that's being changed, but I wanted the board to since it's referenced in this document, we added some materials in the board materials so that the board members could read the previous permissions the board has given us related to global warming issues and climate issues, and I wanted all the board members, especially the new board members, to see that language so you'd be aware that we've been given that permission previously to do that. So I have those items for this, and it maybe if the board members have any questions about the language changes.
Yeah, we have a couple board members signed up to speak. Director Starsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Larry, we've had, I'm looking at item number 21 where you added wildfires, and this goes back to the meeting I held with your staff and my fire chief, and I know I had the City of Sacramento, Metro Fire. I just want to make sure when you put this language in here, one of the discussions we had was those people are trying to say your impacts of what you're trying to accomplish on the wildfire having serious impacts on our fire departments. And so we're in the middle of discussions there. I don't want you now to go back and say we now have direction from the board that we're going to hammer you guys and not listen to their concerns, because many of us up here as fire chiefs have very serious concerns about that. So I'm not sending any direction to the fire chiefs in the region that this board, I think the negotiations were moving very nicely. I thought you guys, we all had good concepts of what we wanted to accomplish. I appreciated the district's goals, and I appreciated the concerns of the chiefs, but I just wanted to be sure that I'm not intending to send that message, and I just wanted, maybe you could update, because many of the members here as fire chiefs have probably spoken to them about it as well. Are we moving along on that? Let's make sure this isn't some kind of direction that you cannot negotiate something with them.
No, absolutely not. In fact, we held a meeting yesterday afternoon with staff talking about going into the discussions, and I will personally attend the meeting with the fire chiefs.
Okay.
I understand what the board's feeling is in that regard. It's a situation where clearly state law has some directions as to how we should go, but we also understand that the fire mission of training has to go on too. So we will find a place where we're both okay with that.
Okay. I mean, I support this general concept.
Sure.
I just don't want it being interpreted or used in some manner that's going to be to the detriment of their chiefs, because their concerns are legitimate, as are yours, but there's a middle ground in there somewhere that's very reasonable.
And
Thanks.
We have that meeting scheduled, and we'll have multiple meetings if we need those.
Okay,
So-
thank you. And thank you for moving that item off so that we could have those
All right.
discussions. I'm sure the chiefs
Okay.
appreciate it.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Natoli.
Yeah, I had likewise a question on item 21 on the wildfires. I understood that to be more controlled burns, the issue that Director Starks is talking about. Again, I had been contacted as well. That had to do with, and it may involve wildlands where they're doing some controlled burns versus wildfires. I guess what struck me as odd as to how you pair those up. They both involve smoke. But wildfires and fuel reduction, whether it's in the forested lands and or in areas that are in the foothills and so forth, and maybe you just did it for convenience of having one less item rather than having a 22. But I guess I don't put the wood smoke, generated from either households and or other sources, in the same category as wildfires. And I guess I wanted a little more clarification. When we talk about wildfires, I know that certainly has impacted our air district in the past, but those are either caused by natural events or some man-made causation, and can certainly impact the air quality during many times during the year. So I guess I'm kind of curious as to what sort of direction you are seeking as relates to wildfires, and why that was grouped with the wood smoke.
Well, actually, smoke from both of those is smoke in the air.
Yeah, I get it. Well, that's I said that. Yeah.
And at times, they come at the same time. We spend a lot of time working in both areas. The incentive program on wood stoves, the board is well aware of that. But on wildfires, prescribed burns, we have put a lot of effort in over the years in the valley, not particularly related to wildfires, although we do get involved with those. We report, we help protect the public. The issue that you're talking about with the fire departments is if fires that are 10 acres or more fall under Title 17. And it's clear in Title 17 that there's a process that we have to go through. And that the fire departments do. The problem was that they were mixing training burns with prescribed burns. And we need to split those out so that we have, for training burns, they have more permission. If they were together, Title 17 would be very, very prescriptive. So what we're trying to do is split that out so that they clearly know that for prescribed burns over 10 acres, they have to follow a certain path that's in state law. But if they want to do a training burn, then we're going to work out a negotiated deal for us to have some enforcement discretion, if you will, where we have an agreement with them that if they proceed in a certain way, they can do their training burns, separate from Title 17.
So let me ask you there, so you're using wildfire in a term that would be in the open areas where you're having burns, because again, I said a moment ago, controlled or prescribed, however you want to describe that. Wildfires, at least what triggered with me is you get a forest fire, or we've had serious fires in the eastern part of the county that have burned tens of thousands and thousands of acres, tens of thousands of acres, and gone across El Dorado and Amarillo County lines. And so I guess when I say wildfires, I was thinking that you were looking at legislation that would relate to basically fires that are out of control that the fire departments have to respond to. I wasn't thinking so much along the lines what you were describing or the issue that we have currently that you're working on. So you're using wildfires in a more limited term then? I mean, description or what?
For this particular board item, we were simply just, we weren't even thinking about the issue of training burns.
Okay, yeah.
And I understand the direction, so, and how this could be construed as related to that. In our minds, this was not related at all to the training burn issue. We're going to deal with that. But in the context of wood smoke and wildfires gets in my world to a whole range of things. Maybe exceptional events, how we relate to exceptional events in with the federal government. It will relate to how we respond to things like the King Fire. We were very fortunate here in Sacramento that the smoke from that fire stayed away from us. It was amazing that we never got any winds that blew the fire down here. The impact up in Placer County and on the other side was huge for the communities there.
So can I use a for example?
That's what I think
Okay,
about.
so a for example would be if there was legislation regarding funding for fuel reduction, you know, in the forested lands, that we would be, as a district, would look at taking a position on that bill, supporting in the upper parts of watersheds or the western slope or whatever it is, that we would support legislation that might not affect the immediate geographical area, but be good because it would, reduce the chances of having a wildfire in forested lands. Is that?
That could be one of the things. There's a program in Placer County that we've supported where they're trying to come up with a way to get to get some kind of credits so they can get additional funds to thin the forest and help close that gap. So there's a whole range of things when I think of wildfires. None of them are related to the issue that you brought up. And I clearly get that direction.
Yeah, no, I know you do. And I was just looking to get some sense of what when using wildfires more broadly than what you were looking at.
It could be prescribed burns. It could also be exceptional events. There's a whole range of different places that we connect into that. Okay. So that would, and again, anytime on this list, I'll tell the board, if I have an item that, for example, it falls in here and I have direction, but we end up with, say, CSAC and the League of Cities opposing a bill, we're not going to take a position on that unless we come back. I know what kind of issues the board members would want us to move forward on, and if we have a question on that, I don't take this direction carte blanche. I will come back to the board if I think that there's a conflict on anything like that.
Anybody else? Going once, going twice? All right. Anybody want to make a motion?
And I do have one thing that I wanted to cover with the board here. If I could have it overhead. We have a whole range of issues we're working with on climate. They could be cap and trade funding.
Clerk, can you zoom in? Oh, thank you.
It could be cap and trade funding. It could be issues with EPA on their new rule on 111D for facilities that create electricity. It could be a whole range of things. We spend a lot of time working on that. But an emerging area that I wanted to tell the board about was adaptation. Most of the efforts the state has done over the last 10 years, AB 32, SB 375, cap and trade, have all been related to mitigating. We know now that a certain amount of heat is already built into the system. And in California, we've been dealing with things like wildfires and drought and such for a long time. So the term adaptation has been coming more and more and more into the fore. And yesterday, I was at a hearing, Senate EQ, environmental quality. I testified on regional, on the region's perspective about adaptation and this organization that I'm going to tell you about here and the work that we've been doing. This is about the Capital Region Climate Readiness Collaborative. Let me go to this slide. As I said, in California, there are many things that have happened. Fire, flood, the way our agriculture has been impacted by water. All of those are things that we need to adapt to and plan for, and the state has been working on and adapting to. We found out a couple of years ago at a meeting in Los Angeles that the Office of Planning and Research was talking to 3 regions about regional impacts in rules and regulations that they were moving forward. LA, San Diego, and San Francisco. We felt that the Sacramento region should be represented at that table because what they were talking about was those issues that can't be dealt with particularly at a state and county level. When you talk about water, you talk about a watershed. When you talk about floods, you talk about a floodplain. When you talk about fire, you talk about forest. So those kinds of issues have a bigger footprint. And many of you, for example, the Basin Control Council that Don has sat on for years, that's an issue that covers the whole basin. What we wanted to ensure was that when the state was moving forward with regulations and rules and plans, that they were thinking about a regional perspective and one that our region had a footprint in the discussions. In LA, San Diego, and San Francisco are all coastal. Their issue is sea level rise. But in Sacramento, if we were talking to the state about issues, adaptation issues that impact us, we would want that discussion to include water, flood, and we are very interested in what happens up in the mountains with the snowpack, but also fires as it relates to, as we were just talking about. So we asked for and got the permission to add Sacramento to that discussion. And we've ended up now with 5 collaboratives. We've added last December Sierra Camp, which covers the Sierra foothills, and formed an organization called ARCA. It's a collaborative of those 5 different regions. And we have been able, in many cases, to sit down and talk to the state as they're passing, for example, when they were working on the Sustainable Community Strategy, that SACOG is going to be accessed for their funding. There was no mention of climate adaptation in that document. So now we've gotten that added in. The state research plan, we were able to get in and talk and make some changes to the state research plan. So what this is under my climate umbrella of work that I do, is we've added this new thing, and it even relates, for example, to a paper that we're taking to the Nancy, can you make that any bigger?
Oh, sure.
To a paper that we're taking to the on the Cap to Cap trip on business resilience, and you'll see there meetings that we will have with the Office of the Administrator in Office of Climate Change in EPA, and we are likely even to be able to meet with the CEQ, which is a White House office, on the upcoming Cap to Cap trip on the business resilience. So this covers many areas. It's as all climate things, a complex area, but it is very important, I think, for our region to be at the table when the state agencies, when the state regulators are writing rules and regulations, and our perspective needs to be in those documents. So that's what I wanted the board to know, that in addition to climate mitigation, AB 32, SB 375, we also are talking with the state about adaptation. And just like the hearing yesterday in Senate EQ, there is going to be legislation this year related to this issue. And we wanted our voice and to have the ability to speak to that legislation as it moves forward. So you have in your packet the previous permissions I've gotten for climate, and I wanted you to know that adaptation is something we're also working on pretty regularly at the district. And I can answer any questions. Otherwise, that's all the information I wanted to pass on to the board today.
Thank you, Larry. All right. Next item? Do we have our motion and vote? Okay. Did somebody make a motion? I'm sorry, Don?
The staff recommendation.
Okay.
Second.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? All right.
Next item is a public hearing item, number 8, conduct a public hearing and adopt a resolution approving amendments to Rule 902 asbestos.
Good morning. I'm Alita Kennard. I work in the Program Coordination Division. Bridget Tolstrup is my manager. And one of the programs I oversee is the Rural Development Program. Nancy, So last month at the January board hearing, we had amendments to Rule 902 asbestos that the board considered, and you adopted all the amendments except for one specific section, which is Section 404.1C. You had a commenter that had concerns about that section, and so you gave staff direction to go back, work on modifying that language, and return this month with proposed language. So we have done that with Mr. Kimmel. He is unable to be here today, but you have an email attached to your board item for this month that he's satisfied with what we have proposed. Just to orient you, what we've done in this proposal or show in the overhead is the blue language is what you saw in January, and the red language is what we've added since that January board hearing. And the biggest change is number 3, where they can request a shorter notification period if necessary by contacting the air pollution control officer, and then we would consider whether it's justified to give them a shorter notification. So that's really all I had for the presentation. So staff recommends that you close the public hearing, determine that the amendment is exempt from CEQA, and adopt the amendment.
All right, we have a couple of board members to sign up to speak. Any public comments received?
No.
Okay. Mr. Starsky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you guys for working with them on that. I think you found a practical solution to it, so I really do appreciate the effort, because we got to try to work with these people, and that's a good example of you guys doing it, so thanks for doing that. And not for purpose of discussion, I'll move the item, all the motions, close the public hearing, move the item with the modification.
All right, Mr. Cerna.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I too want to echo Mr. Starsky's thanks, Alita and others, for listening carefully to a constituent who I think had some fairly reasonable requests, and we heard from a practitioner, and that has obviously affected what we're about to adopt here today. And that doesn't always happen, but when it does, and we take the time to listen, and it's reflected in our policies and our rules, I think that's something to be commended, and I want to thank everyone involved.
Alita, I'd just like to echo the comments of the 2 board members, but also when I read Mr. Kimmel's email, it sounds like we'll still have to work with them a little bit on how to implement this right, and so I just encourage you and the other staff to make sure that we're being smart about that. So,
Yeah, we will.
All right, great. I heard a motion. Was there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? All right. I think that's it. Any comments for the director? No? All right, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Okay.